Hello, my name is Sandra Perrone, Professor of Arts and Humanities at Springfield Technical Community College, Coordinator of the Fine Arts Program and Gallery Coordinator of the Amy H. Carberry Fine Arts Gallery located in Building 28. The Carberry Gallery strives to foster intellectual engagement and dialogue beyond the traditional classroom by breaking preconceived notions of a gallery as an exclusive space. One function of the gallery is to share who artists are and what they create to inspire students to pursue their creative endeavors and career goals. Fine arts courses are open to everyone here at STCC, and the importance of visual literacy to every student's overall educational experience cannot be understated, no matter their major. I originally conceived of these virtual Carberry conversation interviews in response to the pandemic and life on Zoom back in fall of 2020. Each interview covers a wide range of topics, including origin stories, the impact of current events on the artistic process, and the function of art. I continue to offer this virtual format to keep gallery programming fully accessible to everyone while creating an archive of those conversations available on YouTube as a community resource. Today, we celebrate the exhibition Supranatural. In her curatorial debut, Northampton artist Donnabelle Casis creates a unique and timely exhibition that examines the unseen forces shaping human perception, social narratives, and cultural identity as they relate to the nature and world beyond our typical awareness. She earned her MFA in painting from the University of Washington. Her personal work has been included in national and international solo and group exhibitions. Casis has received numerous awards and grants, and her work is in several public and private collections, including the Albany Airport. Donnabelle is an extraordinarily creative and innovative person who frequently brings people together who wouldn't otherwise meet. She's on the curatorial committee of the Art Salon, the creator and founder of Florence Night Out. She promotes the work of Pioneer Valley artists on her weekly WHMP Radio Art Beat segment. In 2022, Casis had a solo show, Kinetic Peripatetic, at the Amy H. Carberry Fine Arts Gallery on the campus of Stick, which radically altered her path from an artist who moved from 2D to 3D installations. So today, it's genuinely my pleasure and privilege to welcome Donnabelle back to the Carberry Conversations and hand the interview over to her so she can speak to the curatorial vision of this stunning exhibition and some of the amazing artists who make up this show, Supranatural. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's just an honor for me to bring all these artists together to show in this amazing gallery space. The Amy H. Carberry Fine Arts Gallery is such an inspiration for really why I chose these works and the community that will come and see the work as well. So again, I'm very much honored to have this opportunity. So today we have 4 of the 11 artists joining us this evening. We have Rashad Glover. We also have Sean Green, Jay Hart, and Malika Durka. And what a show it is. And I'm hoping everyone gets a chance to see it. And what I'd like to do tonight is sort of briefly talk about the inspiration or the thinking behind the title and theme of the show, because that's something that has always fascinated me. How do artists really kind of cull from the ether their inspiration, their motivation, and their propensity to do and make work? And a lot of it, I feel like, is very similar amongst artists, but what sets it apart is really the process and practice in the studio. And you'll get to see in the show various media being used in art making and conceptual ideas that may seem disparate, but in fact still share the same sort of core foundation of finding their visual voice in a world, in a community. And so with that, I'd also like to mention too that the title Supranatural, not supernatural, was definitely intentional because I feel like natural alludes to the fact of our tangible world, how we experience our environment, who we are connected to, our experiences in general, these sort of physical, tangible things that we experience on a day-to-day basis. And also supra alludes to that which is perhaps intangible. And I kind of think of it as the ether from which our inspiration is pulled from. And so putting the two together really sort of sets the tone for the show. So as we walk through the show in the images, I'm going to speak with the artists as we go through to kind of give you a sense of as if you are walking through the gallery space. And so the first piece we encounter is, of course, Molly Kadurka's gorgeous piece called Number Five of a Mythic Pause. And, this piece is absolutely stunning. It takes over an entire wall. It's 9 by 9 feet, and we thought, oh, perhaps it might extend beyond the wall, but I think Molly was able to get everything in there within that particular space. And as soon as you walk into the gallery, it feels as if you are stepping into another world, a portal perhaps, into the worlds in which artists reside in their creative minds. And so, Molly, I would love if you could sort of speak about this piece and your creative process, because it's really quite amazing.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Donnabella, for curating this and getting us all together. And Sandra, thank you for helping me put this up and for all that you do here, which is a lot. Um, so yeah, I didn't realize I had to go first. I guess that's when you're next to the title. Um, it's called Number Five, which is not a particularly inspired title because this is really one of a series of in which the fifth is the last. So A Mythic Pause is really the title of the series of works. And it's a body of 5 pieces that are all similar to this in terms of scale and medium, but the image changes. So the beginning of the series is these prints, which I think of as like a rock-like or terrestrial texture that creates a sphere. And over the course of the series, they gradually open up. There's this sort of perfect equilibrium in the middle at number 3, which is also like the largest work. And they gradually unravel. The earth starts to give way to the sky and eventually ends with this piece, number 5, which I think of as ending with a moment of bright illumination. And um, A Mythic Pause, the title came from this idea. I mean, well, maybe I should back up. I think a lot of my work is really about landscape and how we engage with the natural world. And for me, I'm coming from a painting background. I was when I was starting to get into the genre of landscape, I always felt like traditional landscape paintings really fell short of expressing like true reverence of the sublime. And we're also more informed by mythology, even, very false mythology, manifest destiny, things like that. So I wanted to think of ways and formats to remake a landscape that feel right or feel familiar, but are different, like distinctly different from the tradition that the Western tradition that they've come from. So this was kind of my answer to that, was to reformat the ground in relationship to the sky and to be a little bit more scientifically informed as well. So the mythic pause is also about a change that is going to happen to the Earth, where our galaxy, the Milky Way, is on a collision course with the Andromeda Galaxy. They've actually discovered that little dust particles from both galaxies are already starting to intermingle and stuff, which is kind of cool. Um, but eventually, when the two galaxies merge, it's going to be a whole lot of changing that happens. They're convinced nothing's going to happen to the Earth. Like there's not going to be a strike or anything like that. I guess the distances are just too far. But what will happen, should anybody be here to witness it, is the night sky is going to completely change, and our night sky is actually going to be lit by the light of millions of new stars, which is, so there's going to be this like moment of brilliance, which I think is quite stunning. But what it also is going to mean is that we're no longer going to be able to look out into deep space. So we won't be able to see beyond the boundary of our own new galaxy. So the idea of studying other universes or other galaxies that are further away from us, all of which we can do now, will no longer, we won't have access to it. So our world in some ways, or our point of view of the universe, will actually kind of close in, which I thought was a really interesting, it's just an interesting thing to think about, and to reflect on like our own point of view and place within the larger world, which is so much smaller, and the world is so much bigger than what I think we think about. And I think my work is really an effort to create awe and reverence for the natural world, and hopefully inspire more respect for it than what we have. So
Well, and to remind us that we're not the only ones here, and this earth is our only earth, and it's like we should really take care of it. Now, this process of installing the piece was such a major endeavor, and here we see this image here of you ironing the backs of the paper to hang it. And yeah, just please briefly, if you could just tell us a little bit about how you installed it, because this piece
yeah,
is monumental. Like you can't
yeah.
not think about how it makes you kind of feel small next to the piece, and really gives you that perspective of what's beyond, for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you. So yeah, the kind of the nuts and bolts of it. So, what you're actually looking at, like that kind of rocky texture, those are all holographic prints, which I've made and then collaged together. And then everything is then backed by fabric and cut out again, and then assembled and like basically wheat pasted onto the wall. So when you do look at them, like sometimes, like there is part of what I wanted to do with this work is to make the works feel like really permanent. Like they're big, they look heavy, like they suck into the wall. They feel really like they're on there and they're not moving anywhere. But they're actually they're like decently fragile works. They tear all the time. They break, and I have to repair them, things like that. Um, and they have to come down. So there's, and the process of putting them up and pulling them down, it does shorten the life of the works. I think this is the third time it's been shown, and I'm pretty sure I'll show it at least 5 times, but probably not much more than that. It's really, its life cycle is limited. And again, I think of that as kind of a metaphor for ourselves. Like we're limited. There's only so many times we can be repaired. So
Right. Very fitting to the whole theme of the show. And every single one of these dots is hand painted. That just
yeah,
blows me away. In
yeah,
its, fortitude. This whole piece talks so much about inner fortitude, just the process of making, the scale, the individual aspects of it sort of conglomerating together to become this force that is just suspended for this moment, for us to sort
Mhm.
of ponder and take a mythic pause. So, Molly, wonderful, amazing work, and it's truly awe-inspiring for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.
Now we come right next to Molly's piece. We have two that we also have another piece of Molly's, which is on the other wall. Well, hopefully you'll get to see it another time. But Sean Green is a painter from Florence. We've known each other for quite a while. And when I first was thinking about this particular show, I really thought of him first, because there is one of the things I was thinking about in his current work is sort of how he takes color and swatches of paint and strokes, and somehow they manage to come together and they sort of emanate this incredible vitality and energy. There's almost like an electricity coming off of these paintings. And so, Sean, I know these are untitled, and I'm in the same vein as you. I don't title a lot of things because I want the viewer to kind of get there the way they get there without any sort of leading on. So please tell us a little bit about your process, and if you can share some parts of these works that you wish to divulge about what the inspiration was behind it.
Yeah, sure. And it was great to hear about your work, Molly. It looks really, I'm excited to see it on Saturday. And it's great to be positioned next to such a strong colorless work or a neutral palette, and to have that kind of feeding off of the neighboring works. Um, yeah, I'm really like, I love working within the limitations of painting on a canvas. It's such a simple activity that anybody can do. It's just, some fabric or wood or whatever surface and putting color onto a surface. Um, it's limiting, but also it feels limitless to me. Like anything could happen there, and it feels like a really free space for me where, we live in this world where so much about our lives is determined by just the situation we're in, the different variables that comprise our existence. Um, the fact that I can go to my studio and just have a rectangle and some color to work with and find out something about how I see, how I feel, um, what sort of makes me tick as a person, as a visual person. Like I feel like I'm continually evolving, but also continually finding out what what's the next thrill for my process of painting. And I think it's pretty clear like color is definitely like the thrill for me. um my process with this work, this isn't, you wouldn't necessarily know this about me, but these paintings is the first group of paintings that I've worked with oil um in like 20 years, when I switched to acrylics back in grad school. And so I've been working with these really great acrylics from Guerra Paint um, in New York, and I've just kept getting this little itch to go back to oil because of the physicality and the sort of the how oil paint kind of, I feel like it's more, there's like a real direct relationship with my hand and the paint and the way it responds to my body when I put it on a surface, that I felt like I need to go back to oil and get that sensation, and see what happens. So basically, I feel like I'm rambling here, but I like to typically I'll start with a canvas that I'll probably put a color down to cover the whole surface, and then I'll kind of sit with the canvas for a while and start with a single color. And then hopefully, if I'm in the right headspace, the next color comes and the next color comes. And it's all about intervals for me, where I'll start with a particular, in this case, there's yellows in the middle, which is, I probably started with one of those. And then I think, okay, well, that yellow could go in multiple directions. Which direction do I want it to go in? And I'm always tweaking either the hue, the value, the saturation of the color, um, to try to just kind of chase after something that, I don't know what I'm chasing after necessarily, but just the right feel. I kind of think about music as well and how notes work together, and putting various notes together in a either together in a chord or in a melody, how those can evoke different emotions and feelings. And so it's a kind of improvisation for me, thinking about this in musical terms, choosing, let's say a key to play with, and then working within that key and seeing where you can take it,
Mm.
is real excitement for me.
Well, I know you're a musician, so that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it really does come through the paintings. And one thing you mentioned in your statement that we have displayed next to your work is that you actually say a lot of the thinking actually happens on the glass palette before it almost goes on the canvas, because the colors you say are jostling on the palette, and then it starts to sort of evoke on the palette, which is where the paints are. And then once you move it onto the canvas, then things start singing. And that's such a beautiful analogy when I'm thinking of like jostling, because I feel like these paintings really do look like they're moving, like the images look like they're moving on the panel. And also the oil, of course, has a different viscosity and light that comes. It's you have to see it in person to get a real sense of it, but very visceral way of painting, Sean, and they're just quite striking. And I know this is the first time you're showing this work, so I'm thrilled that you're willing to show it here at the Amy H. Carberry for the first time. So lucky us that you get to see them in person out in the world and in this beautiful context. So amazing,
Thanks
Sean.
for inviting me to share it with you.
Oh my gosh, it was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer. Thank you, Sean. And now, next to Sean, your fellow neighbor is Rashad Glover. And Rashad is new to the area. I met him recently as an artist presenting at the art salon. But when I went to his studio, I was really struck by these two pieces. They are, digital monoprints on acrylic mirror. So they look like glass mirror, but they really are acrylic. And I would love for you to speak about these, because for me, there's so much nostalgia in these pieces, and they sort of harken back to a particular time, but you make it really contemporary while still honoring the past. Could you please let us into your world with these paintings, Rashad, or
I
prints?
yes. These prints were inspired by my great grandmother, who was a midwife in South Carolina, and her daughter, who was I guess um I, she was the help, or she worked in different houses as a maid and stuff like that. And with this, they are part of the Gullah Geechee people in South Carolina. So in 2013, I uh because my dad passed away, and I was thinking about how can I make a series in honor of him. So I looked at the matronage of his family, and I was inspired by my great grandmother. And I was like, well, I want to figure out how it is to live back in that time of my great grandma during that Gullah Geechee era. And so with that, the first thing that came to my mind was vegetation. So I did a series of photography work based off of Carolina vegetation, and they were grayscale, black and white. And then from there, um, I got great reception. My gallery that represents me loved the work, and I let that stay there. And then I went and experimented with other different type of techniques and ideas. And then I decided to come back to the vegetation piece because I saw a mirror piece in my grandma's house that was a print on mirror. And I always grew up with this. So I was like, I always grew around this mirror piece, and I was like, maybe I can intertwine them both. And so I did some research on different artisans that work with mirrors and prints, and I came across a couple, and this was one of the best artisans that I found to collaborate with in constructing the composition. And my aunt told me that the mirror piece that my grandma has was constructed by my cousin, and he gave it to her as a gift. So my cousin was, I guess, one of the first artists that I came by that work in this mirror type of technique. Uh, so I made a series of these, and I believe the first place I showed them at was HCC, and this is the second place I'm showing them at. Um, but and so with this, I just used different vegetation found in public data, uh, found in actual environments, and now working on a new mirror series that's also found at the greenhouse, the botanical gardens at Smith College. And all of these vegetations, again, hones back to the Gullah Islands, the inspiration from that, and just that natural type of lifestyle.
Now, Rashad, when you say Gullah, is my understanding when you're speaking about the Gullah Geechee, you're speaking about sort of descendants of the West and Central Africa who came to the southern regions where you're from? Is that South Carolina, North Carolina,
That's
um,
that's correct.
Florida?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
They're from West Africa, and they came to the States, and uh, I guess as slaves, but then they became freed slaves, and the government gave them islands around the South Carolina and Georgia area. And so and those islands have beaches and stuff like that. So 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 there was a community of these, I guess, tribal people that lived there. And during that time, my great grandmother, she was a midwife, and she helped out the community by delivering over 2,000 babies.
What a history. So much history in these works. And the botanical references to the area, I mean, it really gives you a sense of place, but it could also sort of mean any place, the way in which we are connected to nature, which I really love, and which is why I connected with these two pieces specifically. If you could just explain the titles for us a little bit. I know there are two different titles, each one for each piece.
Sure. Uh this title was in Gullah Geechee they speak a dialect, and it's called Geechee dialect, and it's mixed between French and African. And so and my great grandma speak this dialect. My grandma spoke the dialect, but not around us. So I did some research, and I found a poetry book made in the 1930s that was of Gullah poems. So I read through the book, and I took out certain excerpts that related to, I felt that match with the piece. And this one here is called Forget Di Maga Meant Fit Wa. And so I tried to figure out, like, I don't know exactly what it means, but I'm connected to it. However, the previous one, or the next one, if you can bring that up real quick. Here we go. This one was of someone who's cleansing themselves, someone who's taking a bath, so per se. And this says then scrubby, scrubby, scrub, scrub. So and I knew I was like, yeah, this is the type of uh feeling and words that I want to represent the composition. So yeah.
I really appreciate you giving us a little more story behind the title. And they really do resonate with the images. It's quite remarkable. And the fact that this is sort of in the gray tones, and then the one after this one is such a vibrant yellow tone. They add such a different dimension with the prints on the mirrors. So quite striking. And the fact that you can see yourself in the imagery also is very unique. And I feel, talk to us just briefly about that, because it's almost as if you are bringing us and inviting us in.
Well, in high school, I used to work with the figure, but I haven't worked with the figure in a long time because I didn't want to be biased and I want to connect with the viewer. This is why I thought this was a strong piece, or a strong medium. And so now I have different ethnicities in the composition when they come see the composition itself. And I feel very pleased about that. And if it's one or two people, and then it also reflect the space that it's in. Um, my gallery owner, she saw some photos and she was like, Michelle, what's that red in there? I mean, what is this I'm looking at? I'm like, oh, that's the reflection of the room. You know, that's not actual red in the piece. So it kind of plays with the eye. And that's something that I like and that I admire. Now I'm working with greenhouses again. A greenhouse is like uh if you're having a bad day and you look in the mirror and you're seeing this greenhouse and your reflection, it's like, oh, okay, my environment, my body is a greenhouse, and this is something that I must cherish and I must nourish. So it kind of brings that up in a way. So there are different components that makes me attracted to this series that I'm working on.
I love that. I love that. Very grounding when you're looking at these images. Anytime you feel it, like you look at nature, there's something about connecting to nature and connecting your body within that space. It's quite beautiful.
Thank you.
And thank you, Rashad. And interestingly enough, if we look at the reflection in this piece, we see Jay's two pieces reflected in the mirror. And that's a great segue because we're going to be talking about Jay's work next. Oh, well, we can also look at, so as we move into the space, actually, before we speak about Jay's work, next to Rashad's work is Kim Carlino's work. These are works on paper, beautiful. You need to see these in person, sort of the draftsmanship, the color, the quality of line, really quite remarkable. And of course, Andrew's work, who's next to Kim's work. And it's interesting when I hung these together, actually, Jay was helping me hang these as well. The piece on the right, which is called Lighthouse, spoke to Kim's piece right next to it. And I hadn't even considered that kind of relationship. And there's something about when you look at something on the screen of your laptop and you kind of get a sense of what you're really interested in. But then once the pieces come into the space and you're dealing with sort of the physicality and the color and the arrangement, the artworks really speak to each other so differently in ways that I had not even imagined. And I think that's probably one of my most favorite parts of this. So if you don't mind going back to Kim's piece after looking at this piece, Lighthouse, and then looking at Kim's piece on the right, which is Shifting Perspectives, the next slide has a detail. Andrew's piece and Kim's piece speak to each other. So if you look at the top left corner of the red, burgundy, and gold areas, and then if you look at Andrew's piece on the right and look at the close-up detail, I hadn't even sort of considered those aspects until the pieces were actually in the gallery space. And I wanted to put them together. So something I learned as we were going along. And of course, Andrew's linear work is quite remarkable. Just the conversation between the two pieces is amazing. So here we have on your right is Jay Hart's work. And it was also on the cover of the catalog, in case you were wondering. And it's interesting because when I did a studio visit with Jay, I had put these two pieces together that you'll see, the other piece as well. And there's quite a bit of time between them in which they were made. But there is some aspect I feel that was very much still a thread between both pieces. And I think it speaks a lot about the artist process and sort of how ideas transform or change over time, but somehow there's sort of a linear progression and maybe a not so linear progression, but somehow you know and see the artist's hand in the making and can find the parallels. So if you don't mind, we could go back to the first slide of vitamin D, which you'll see on the right, and completely different materials that she used in the other piece hanging off the wall. So Jay, if you wouldn't mind just speaking about these two pieces. And I know when I asked you about putting them together, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Because you would think I would pick two very recent pieces, but for some reason, I felt like these two sort of spoke together and spoke about the context of supernatural, really.
So, yeah, the piece on the floor actually came, that body of work came from the scrim paintings, like the vitamin D. So when I started making scrim paintings for like 17 years. When I was in grad school, I started painting on translucent scrim. And because it was transparent, I always had a problem trying to, I had to deal with the squareness of a stretcher bar or a frame.
Oh, sorry, Sandra, could you go back to the first piece? That's the one.
Yeah. And because it was so transparent, the painting or the structure of the painting, which is this translucent surface with a frame inside, which was the stretcher bar. And so no matter what I did, I had to push against that square frame. So I would try and cover it up. I would try and integrate it into the composition. I would try and do anything to take away from or cover up the square because it was just so strong. And so that's why in vitamin D, I am covering it up. I'm painting, I'm creating like a border, kind of like a miniature Indian painting, like the ornate edges, and trying to just get away from that square. So and also, not only that, painting on translucent scrim was really difficult, just to get paint to adhere and sit on the surface of on this material was hard because you would put it on and it would just kind of suck through. And so you had to add layers to it to make it, to give it something. And so it took a lot of layers, putting lots of layers of paint on it and letting it dry and then adding more. And also because it was so transparent, my paintings were also very, very white because of the whiteness of the wall. So I was pushing against the translucency being so white and also exposing the back wall of these paintings. So I started stretching like a second layer on the back and painting on the back layer, the top layer, and then started drawing with thread in between, kind of trying to create like kind of sculptural lines. But also I wanted the wall to be seen and exposed. So once actually the piece on the floor is probably one of the earlier kind of tube-shaped paintings I made. And this was, well, I guess I did one in 2017 that was just tubes on the top, and then it came down and they kind of swirled around on the floor. It was really big and it was just tubes and no canvas in between. So when I started working on this piece called Love Us Together, it just freed me up from having to deal with the square frame, and so I could shape my paintings however I wanted them to be. I also liked playing with the back wall. So like that kind of teardrop shape in between is painted canvas, but it's supposed to reference the wall behind it. And it just freed me up to be able to not have to deal with that square stretcher, but just to be able to, I just really wanted to play with shapes. And then also it was just really great to be able to put paint down on a canvas or a surface and not have to build the layers up. And so yeah, this was really fun and a fun piece for me. I actually made this piece, so it's titled Love Us Together, because I made it during COVID, when everyone had to be distant. And I just made this because I kind of craved to be able to share intimate space with people. And so it's kind of two forms representing maybe two people, and they're kind of a little gesture of leaning in and sharing this space. And then the tubes kind of create like a union or a boundary around these two people, holding them together.
So beautiful. And what I love about these two pieces together is really sort of how you were all thinking about how you were problem solving too, and how you got from working within the square, within a stretcher, to then becoming completely out of the square and free form, and then coming off the wall. Like, I think what a progression. And what I really admire is sort of the playfulness and the experimentation, and just willing to try whatever it is to make manifest whatever you are thinking, which I think is the main aspect of how we as artists work. It's like we just want to know what it looks like because we have this idea in our minds, but then what does it look like in real life, and how do we make that happen? And so this whole show, thank you, Jay, for sharing that about your process, because it really is quite wonderful to see both of them together, because I love both of them for different reasons, but also the storytelling behind it, and where you are now, because I don't think you've gone back to the rectangle, right? I think you've it's a lot of free form still, like still, not quite square.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Well, I think that's a great way to sort of tie up the exhibition. I know there are a few more images left, I believe, Sandra. We have Reed Anderson's work here, gorgeous collages. He sort of talks about nature and the man-made, just all hand-cut holes in his pieces. And then we also have Vic Casada's work, and this work was such an amazing installation process, becoming a part of the wall. But I'm loving how it sits there and that it has its own presence. You know, Vic works a lot with land use and material and earthly things. But in regards to, you know, borders, but being beyond borders. And that's what I really loved about their work. And you could see Adria's sculpture in the center there. I really do hope that people get a chance to come to the gallery and really sort of walk through and spend a little time with these pieces. This is Brandt's drawings. These also have that sort of element of capturing the energy of nature, which I really resonated with. They really do. You get the essence of what he's experiencing at the moment he's drawing. And in the background there's Lovid. It's a husband-wife team, and they really use, this is called tide predictor, and you know, it's using algorithms, but it's really tied to things in nature, and the ways in which we interact and sometimes try to control, but things are just sort of out of control. So, I mean, there are so many questions that come up when you see the work. And hopefully, as you see it, I hope it brings more clarity, but also opens up more questions for you as you walk through. This is Adria's work. I love that shadow on the floor. These sirens are kind of luring you to think about different power structures that we're surrounded by. And, you know, especially now during this time of election season, kind of questioning what we are drawn to in different ways. This is Sentinel as well, sort of a guardian of sorts. Just a towering figure. And I love those little mirrors in there that we didn't really discover until we were actually installing it. So another way to reflect the viewer as they are interacting with the piece. There's another shot. And this is also Lovid, which is Pollen Punch, working with glitching and loops. I just love the sort of maximalist expression that they work with digital imagery and technology. And that's the view from the front gallery, which is quite stunning. So I want to thank you all for joining me today and speaking about your work. I find it, you know, when artists give us a little insight into their practice, I find it is probably one of the most generous things an artist can do, because it really is a very sort of private practice, and to allow us a little insight is really an honor. So I appreciate you all sharing that today with our audience.
Thank you, Donnabelle. This is really a really great show. It's so fun to see it come up.
It was, gosh, I just loved it.
So Donnabelle, I just want to say a couple closing words, which is a huge thank you to you and to all of the artists in the show, because it is just beyond words, exquisite. Okay. Also inviting everyone to the reception on Saturday, October 21st. And then Donnabelle is one of the most generous people I know. She has donated so many layers to this exhibition, not only in her creative vision, but in her skill and expertise. And she is doing a sound bath for our students, which is incredibly generous, and they are incredibly excited to have the opportunity to do that. Even if they don't know exactly what you're going to do, it's going to be interesting. And then you're doing like 4 things in 1 week. And then you're coming back and doing a gallery talk, a special curators talk in the gallery where we're going to basically walk around the space. And so we have in person, we have Zoom. And so hopefully there are options. And for those who can't physically come to the gallery, we will also have this conversation, this interview. So I thank you all so much for your time and for your vision and making this possible. Thank you.
And thank you for making it all possible, Sandra. I know it was a Herculean effort, so I appreciate it all. Thank you so much, and enjoy the show.
Okay,
Thank you.